Hey everyone, it's Kathleen from Kathleen Marie Design and Online Art with Kathleen. In today's lesson, we will be making concentric shapes inspired by the artist Wassily Kandinsky. In this lesson, we will be inspired by his artwork, squares with concentric circles that you can see here. Our interpretation of this lesson is going to expand upon this artwork. We will start with concentric circles, and then we have the option to add 3 different concentric shapes, and we will be doing all of this with watercolor paint. So for today's lesson, I have a medium-sized pointy paintbrush. I have Faber-Castell watercolors, paper towel, and a cup of water. This is my finished example. And now I will go back and begin with a white piece of paper. I am using a larger 9x18 piece of watercolor paper. If you do not have larger size paper, you could do the same lesson with smaller paper and do each shape in a different set of paper. But since I do have this larger paper, I'm going to begin by folding it into fourths. So I'm going to take my paper, fold it in half like a book, really making sure the edge lines up. Give it a good crease. Watercolor paper is a little bit thicker, so it creases a little bit kind of crinkly. Now I'm going to take my book and fold it in half again, lining up the edge. Giving it a good crease. When I open it up, I will have my paper separated into fourths with equal rectangles. I'm going to begin by making concentric circles. So I'll dip my brush in the water, pick any color I like. I'm going to try my best to find the center of my rectangle, and I'm going to draw a circle and fill it in. When we're doing this, we really don't want our watercolor paint to smear or blend together, so I'm going to take off any excess paint so there's no kind of clear puddles. All right, each time I'm going to really wash my brush. I do so by tapping it on the bottom of my water cup. Going to go into a new color. I'm going to dry off my brush a little bit because I want to make sure that my watercolor paint is not too wet. And now I'm going to make a concentric circle. Concentric is a word that means a shape inside of a shape inside of a shape. So to make concentric circles, we will just continuously paint rings that are getting larger until we fill up the entire rectangle shape. Depending on what size brush you are using, will determine how thick or thin your circles are, these rings that you're making. You could always, even with a smaller brush, paint it out so it gets a little bit bigger. It's up to you. If you would like to keep your ring small, that looks very interesting. It will just take a little bit longer. My rings are mostly the size, kind of the width of my brush, if I am pushing it to its fullest spread. So with a hard pressure, the bristles can only go to a certain distance depending on how large your brush is. So with a firm pressure, that is about as wide as my bristles will get. It does not matter what colors you're choosing or what order you put them in. You can try doing patterns. You can make a rainbow, whatever you like. As I get further on in my rings, I will no longer be able to go all the way around with one brush stroke. As you see here, it's starting to get a little bit scratchy. So I do want to add a small amount of water, go back into my paint. That will help me to fill the rest of the ring. And since it was a little bit darker, I'm going to go back around and try to even that out. Now, at a certain point, we are no longer going to be able to make a full ring around. And that is going to be in my next circle. Add a magenta. With this magenta, I am going to touch the crease that I made when we first started and folded. And I'm going to touch the top. Now, I've done a pretty good job in finding the center. So that meant that I touched the top and bottom at the same time. Now, depending on how big you are making your circles, or if your first circle was not exactly in the center, you might get to the top or bottom first, but still have room on the other side. So that means maybe I ran out of space on the top, but I still have room on the bottom, and that's okay. Keep going until you reach the top and bottom. You might not have the same color all the way around. All right, so now I have touched the top and bottom. Now I'm only going to be able to do arcs or curves on the side. So I can do a C shape on the left, making sure it's always important that we're not going past the crease on the bottom. If it makes it easier for you, you could work on this with your paper folded, and then you know exactly where you need to stay. So if I folded it like this, I know that I can't go below the crease. I do want to fill in those little gaps. I am adding small bits of water so that my curves and circles are pretty dry. Like I said in the beginning, if it's too wet, each color will start to smear into the next. I have space for a few more curves before I'm going to touch the center crease and the right side. I'm going to stretch this one out so that it is my last full curve. I do have a little bit more space on the right hand side, but since I want it to match, I am going to make this curve a little bit wider just so it reaches at the same time. Okay, now all I have space for is the 4 corners. Let's see which color. I'm gonna go back to magenta. So top corner, bottom corner. You might think you can just fill this corner in with only one color, and you could, but you really do have space to do at least 2. I'm going to do 2 more in the corners. Now we're just gonna fill the remaining part of this corner in. Great, now I have finished one full rectangular box with my concentric circles. In the remaining 3 boxes, you can add any shape you like. An easier shape would be a rectangle since the box itself is rectangular. I'm going to start with a different color in the center and start with a rectangle. Fill it in. Now, you know what happens next. Instead of making concentric circles, I will be making concentric rectangles. So I'll do a rectangular box around my start. All right, you know what's going to happen next. I'm going to continue until I fill up the whole rectangle, and I'll speed it up for you. Now you can see I've done a full rainbow in concentric rectangles. This purple one was the last time I could make a full rectangle. Now I only have 1 stripe on each side. I finished the rainbow, but I will add in a magenta just to finish off this rectangle. Now I have 2 boxes done with my concentric shapes. I think the next one I'm going to do something a little bit trickier. I'm going to do a heart. So we'll do it the same way. I'll start with my heart shape in the middle, and you can do any shape you want. If you don't want to do a heart, you can choose something else. Pentagon, hexagon, or something more simple like an oval or triangle. Now we're making concentric hearts. One thing to note as we're working, we're trying to make sure we're not leaving any white gaps in between our shapes. Each shape is touching the one next to it. I'm going to speed it up and finish up my concentric hearts. You can see something I discussed earlier. I reached the left side before I reached the right, so I can no longer do a full curve in blue, but I can still do a full curve on the other side, and that's okay. So what I'll do is I'll do a full curve on this side with purple, and I'll just do the corners on the left side. Sometimes, depending on the shape and how we've placed it, we don't reach the edges at the same time, and that's okay. I can still do one more curve on the right before I get to only corners. And I'm gonna fill in the left top and the left bottom. So with this one, the right side will actually have one more color than the left side has. And with that magenta color, I have finished my third rectangle. I have one more. For the last one, I'm going to do a triangle. Triangles end up getting a little bit round, which is okay. I do have a few white spaces here, so I'm not even putting the color back on my brush, but just with the wet brush itself, can fill those in. And I'm gonna add, the last step will be my corners. One on that side. Little wet, so it's smearing. Just with a clean paintbrush, nothing on it, I'm gonna go over. Trying to, if my paintbrush is dry, I can almost use it like a sponge to soak up some of that wet paint. Okay. And I'm gonna do 2 more colors on this side, even though I ran out of space on the left. So I'll do 1, and then I'll do, which color would I like to end with? I'll end with purple for that last triangular shape. All right, with that last corner, I have finished my concentric shapes inspired by Wassily Kandinsky. I would love to see your finished work. You can always tag me at Online Art with Kathleen on Instagram or Facebook. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.